anyone from the public? If there's anyone from the public who wants to speak, please, please raise your hand.
I'm not seeing any
I don't see any
Zoom
hands.
hands or anything.
So the approval of the minutes of the November 30th meeting. Would anyone like to move those?
I will move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Ernie and Evie, any additions, subtractions, deletions? If not, all in favor, please say yes.
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 Thank you. The town council report, Mr. Murray. Oh,
I just want to thank
It's a big
everybody.
public meeting.
I'm sorry, was I?
no, I said, I was thinking there were two Mr. Murrays, but I meant you.
Thank you. There are indeed two Mr. Murrays. And both of them have strange ties to Colorado, differently. I just wanted to thank everybody for putting on these town meetings last week. Thursdays went exceptionally well, and I understand that yesterday's did as well. I especially want to thank Mark and Bill for taking care of the signage and getting it posted and removing it is very, very quickly before last night's windstorms. And Michelle for distributing the boxes all over the place. But especially I'd like to thank our town clerk and the supervisor's assistant for doing the yeoman's labor of getting mailers out to everyone in the town in almost lickety split fashion. So I think that was extremely helpful, and you should feel comfortable that to the best of our ability, everybody in the town was informed of these meetings and had the opportunity to participate in them. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Tim. Bill, I'm assuming no report, but you never know.
No, correct. No report from the planning board.
Thank you. So Nan had another meeting tonight, but she will be joining us as soon as she can, which I think will be within the next 20 or 30 minutes. But we're going to have a discussion about the meetings that we've had. I'd like to start with the meeting on Thursday and then go on to yesterday's meeting. I know that not everyone was able to attend both, but I think Bill was able to send out an audio of the meeting that he got today. So thank you for doing that, Bill. So let's talk about the first meeting. We had about 65 people online. We answered, Nan answered a tremendous number of questions. What did you find compelling about what was asked and what was answered? And I'm going to go around and ask people for their opinions. Does anyone want to start? Otherwise, I'll just choose you.
There's no.
Actually, I'm going to just exit for a second because my notes on that are in the other room. So I'll be right back.
Okay. Everyone gets a moment to think the big thoughts. So I'll just go through what we're going to do today, which is to talk about the two meetings, what was generative for us, and what outcomes did we see from those, and then we're going to talk about some work that we need to do before Nan gets set to writing. And I made a small list there, but there might be other things to do. And then we have one more meeting on the 6th, a week from tomorrow, to try to hammer out some details so that Nan can write something that is meaningful, that we can then begin to say, no, that's not what we meant, or yes, that's exactly what we meant. So Bill, now that you have your notes, what do you want to say? Oh, you're on mute, Bill.
I am so sorry. You guys couldn't read my lips.
I put a little.
Okay. All right, yeah, so I'm just looking over some of the questions that were asked. I know I have three things I know I pulled out, and then I'll see what else, because they actually came up in both meetings. One has to do with growth in Caroline, because people understandably were asking, God, do we really need to do anything? And it is very humbling, as well as a bit frustrating to know that we treated this in the comprehensive plan exactly because we knew this would be a question. And it's not a surprise that a lot of people haven't seen that section. The whole first section of the comp plan is about growth in Caroline. And just so everyone on this call knows, for the decade from 2000 to 2010, Caroline had the fastest growing population of any town in Tompkins County. And for the next 7 years, 2010, 2017, we had the second highest. We didn't have, I think we still don't have census data for 2020. So that's kind of slowed that down. And in terms of housing, I pretty much agree with the numbers that Rick came out with. I mean, what we had in there, and again, there's discrepancies between housing data from the assessment office and housing data in the census data. And we did our best to sort of massage those two and understand. And our estimate of the growth rate is actually about 16 houses per year on average from 2005 to 2019, but that includes Bruno Schickel's development because we were looking at housing units. And if you take out his units, you get down to like 6 or 8 per year on average, which I think is in the ballpark of what I think Rick had come up with too. So as Nan said, that's not huge, but neither is it tiny. So we don't face a lot of the same subdivision pressure that say Lansing is facing, but there is definitely growth happening. And so that's what the whole point, the key was to figure out how that growth should continue to happen. So people are asking about growth. Yes, it's happening in Caroline, I guess is the bottom line answer. And our job is to, figure out how to best allow for that growth so that Caroline maintains the wonderful place that it is. Two other questions that came up had to do with renewable energy siting and lighting. And at least I think those came up maybe both nights. Certainly they came up on Thursday. Quickly want to point out that we do have some work to do as a zoning commission on renewable energy siting. The siting laws, the solar law and the battery law do not specify locations because as we understood from our town lawyer, we couldn't essentially zone. We couldn't specify any particular places were off limits. So they are more like upgraded site plan laws that apply for any development in the town. And I think that this committee does need to give Nan some feedback on what zones would be appropriate. And we can go into that more detail, but I think we've already sort of talked about it consistent with our other things, that large things like a large commercial solar farm would be out in the ag rural zone. I think small scale solar would be almost anywhere, but the law makes distinctions of 3 different classes of solar size. And so we can talk about that as a committee, but we do have some work to do. And on the battery issue as well, there's definitely some things to talk about in terms of where battery facilities may or may not be located. And I want to go take the time now to do that, but I just want to alert us that we have that work to do. I picked up on those questions in those 2 sessions. And questions on lighting, I think, came up in both meetings. In that, I do want to say that dark sky standards have come up, and Nan referenced those, which is great. Those standards are referenced in our existing site plan law and the revised site plan law. But I believe that those are a bit outdated. And so we updated that work for the solar siting law. And so Nan, I just want to confirm that you got a note I sent you Saturday. So much was flying back. You were very busy over the weekend. I did send a note with some info on the language in those laws to you on Saturday. I just want to make sure you got it. Okay, cool. And then the last thing I want to bring up was more for Sunday on CAFO. So we can get to that later. As far as Thursday goes, I felt from the questions that people properly were approaching this as, okay, how, what feedback can I give the zoning commission on zoning? There was some pushback on why we're doing this at all. Why isn't there someone opposed to zoning on the committee, all that kind of stuff. But overall felt like the town was sort of with us that, yeah, we should be considering this. I think it remains open for the town board to be lobbied, hammered on whether there should be zoning at all. But the work of this committee is to come up with a zoning plan and then see if the town likes it. And I felt like we got some good, questions on that in terms of design standards, lighting, as I mentioned, and other stuff. So I guess that's my comments from that first meeting.
Okay, I wanted to say I had a question about, aren't we having privilege of the floor tonight? We did at the very beginning of the meeting. Maybe somebody wasn't on. If that's the case, somebody could raise their hand and ask me. So we'll see. But is there anyone else who else on the committee would like to make some comments about Thursday? Don't all talk at once. Okay, I'm gonna choose Michelle and then Evie.
Well, I guess I have to say I wasn't rushing to comment because I couldn't think of that much that stood out to me. I guess kind of like Bill, I feel like there is the question about, why don't we have an anti-zoning person on the committee? And I just wish that could be made clear to people that the purpose of this committee is to come up with a plan. It is not to debate whether or not we should have zoning. And the other thing that, for some reason, I kept thinking about this a lot. I think towards the end, somebody asked, why don't we just try it out with the design standards and see how things go? But then I realized if we did that, we wouldn't know for like 10 years, if things were working. And so I think, I guess I would also like to make the case so that people listening or, when we have other meetings, that now is our chance to act on the comprehensive plan and trying out these other things and see how they work. We're not going to know for a long time, and then they may have failed, right? So we've kind of lost our chance. And so, yeah, I wasn't at the Sunday meeting. I did listen to the recording, which again was kind of interesting. I think there's still that thing about why aren't we debating whether or not we should have it and the zoning. And anyway, I just see our job is to come up with the most fair plan, and then it's out of our hands. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Michelle. Evie.
Yeah, I was particularly interested in the conversations on Sunday with a group of folks that in that hour or so in the end who
Let me ask you, do you have anything from Thursday that you want to say? Because I was going to do another round about Sunday.
then I'll wait to the other round because this
Okay.
was really more pertinent to Sunday.
Okay. Ernie?
Yeah, I don't remember that we were actually ever polled as to what our personal feelings about zoning are, because I thought I made it pretty clear on my application that I was not exactly a pro zoning person, but understand that there are some evils that we must endure for the greater good. So that being said, if that question comes up again, you can answer it that we aren't all pro zoning here. Be that as it may, I think that the presentation that Nan gave was excellent. I had this terrible feeling, or not a terrible feeling, I had a feeling that it would have been really good if she had given that to all of us on day one, because we would have gotten through a whole bunch of stuff a lot more quickly, because we would have a better sense of what it is that we were doing here. I don't know how to react to the questions, answers. My feeling is that they reflect some very small portion of the people who actually care about this issue, and that they are in such a format, they're given such a very short and inadequate ability to really make themselves clear about their concerns, that I don't know that there's any takeaway here that I feel came out of this one way or the other.
Okay.
That's it.
Bruce and then Will.
Well, on the Thursday night meeting, a lot of the basic stuff did come up that's always been coming up, like, size of the hamlets. Are there other places there that could be a hamlet? Designated commercial areas, you know, things that we need to discuss and hash out and come up with. And, you know, the rest of it's pretty much stuff we've talked about and great. And Nan's presentation was great. And I'm kind of like with Ernie, I feel that with the little amount of public input we have, are we really ready to make those decisions for the town? So I think we need to have some more public input myself.
Okay, Will,
The presentation was great, and I feel like I have more homework now. Because honestly, there were a few things in there where I sort of did oh, that's interesting. I think I want to look at that more deeply. I honestly got through the video right up to the part where the questions started, so I can't really comment on the questions for Thursday night. Not yet, anyway.
okay, and I'll comment, my comments about Thursday. I was really thrilled to see that many people on, and of course, we didn't get as many questions as we did. It was fascinating. We had twice as many people and we only got, I would say, about half as many questions. But I thought that the questions were all of the very relevant things. What is this going to do to my taxes? What about, you know, what do you mean by a small business? Which we got, I think, both times. What does this mean about, you know, do things get grandfathered in or don't they? So I thought that we had the ability to, you know, we answered a lot of questions, and I didn't see there was not a huge amount of pushback in that another question came in or follow up over those. So I think that in general, people seem to be satisfied with the answers that we gave them. I'll just myself go on now to Sunday and say, I was actually really surprised that we had half as many people in the public meeting as we did in the online. But I thought there was sort of a difference. There were a number of people who were very interested in the maps. There was, I think, a lot of discussion looking at the hamlets, particularly more so than the overlays. And I was, you know, there was a certain amount of, you know, when are you going to stop beating your wife kind of questions a little bit, but there was also that. I think people are frustrated. There were some people there who were very frustrated because they are very concerned that zoning will change the way of life they have, or make them not be able to do something that they or their children or somebody might want to do with their property. And I understand that, but I also understand, and I like what Nan had written today, was that she wished that she had answered one question about freedom, is that your freedom may also impinge upon others. And you have to, that's one of the balancing acts that zoning has, is that we're trying to make sure that if you're going to try to preserve the environment, if that's a goal, then no, you know, not everybody can have their own nuclear power plant. That's the answer to that. You know, there is that kind of a trade-off. So there are trade-offs in zoning, and I think some of those really emerged in the discussion, and I was very happy about that. I will also say that to Bill's point earlier on about the number of housing starts, I think at a meeting just maybe a month ago, you announced that there were already 20 housing starts so far as of then, which was, I think, the end of October in the town, which is much higher than usual in a year. So that seemed really, so there is growth. I'll go back and to Evie, because I know Evie had things she wanted to say about Sunday.
Yeah. I think what stood out for me on Sunday was probably a function of just being in a public setting versus being in an electronic digital setting. I was very struck by how the social facilitation occurred, just in terms of the dynamics of the group. You're in a public meeting with other people, and it generates conversation and questions. To Nan, I think to your point, or I don't remember who said this, that there were that many more questions, even though we had far fewer people. And it made me think a lot about how much more I'd like to see us move around as we're discussing Speedsville. I'd like to have a meeting in Speedsville. We're discussing, it's not going to be strategically possible to go to every space to have a public meeting. There may not be space for it, but the voices that represented voices of the development folks who were there and speaking about their concern was a different perspective. And I think I need to let that sift through my head a little bit more as I stop and think about the future for the entire town. Because I had been really, for myself, I had been thinking more along the lines of the impacts to residences and to hamlets as a function of perhaps smaller impacts from smaller businesses and smaller uses that we had been talking about, less so the kinds of things that, for example, Bruno was talking about with respect to a development like Boyceville. So it's not changing my mind, but it's making me want to sit back and realize that what I hadn't heard a lot of was the point of view from, I guess, just to shortcut it, from those who would be looking to develop properties for one way or another. And there were several people there that brought that up. And Nan was part of some, if not all of that, which I'm really glad you were, Nan. So I think we have more work to do. I do also think that we can and ought to have our next meeting be one that we carefully create a space for people to verbalize their questions, so that they can't grandstand, so that they can't go on for 20 minutes. That's very doable. It happens all the time. But I think the ability to say something out loud is compelling for folks, and it makes us look heavy-handed if we can't make that possible. So I really would urge us to think of a way to do that. So those were some of my thoughts. I had other thoughts, but I'll hold off.
Michelle, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I listened to the link that Bill sent, and I didn't hear anything from Bruno Schickel. So when did that come up? Was that,
They were after,
After.
it was when people were going around looking at maps and stuff like that.
Okay. So some of us, are unaware of all that. That stuff wasn't recorded, so we don't know what.
Right, because it was all over.
Can I ask, can I just jump in? Is it appropriate for us to be actually talking about the people whom we had conversations
Right.
with, presumably in a, person to person format, not a public format? Just asking.
Right.
Well, let's try to keep the people out of it and then talk about what we were hearing. Bill, I see your hand up.
Great, yeah, thanks. Yeah, and during his last point, I don't know, Ernie, though the meeting is a public meeting, and I agree there's a question, if you're having a conversation off to the side, would that be considered public or private? Like, it's an open question, who's there? Yeah, anyone can see that, but to circle around to the meeting, I keep falling back on the way things sort of used to be pre-pandemic, and we indeed would have things out in the public and around town. So when we did the comp plan stuff, we made sure one of our workshops was held in Speedsville. And another one was, held, sure, in Caroline. We tried to move it around. I would love to do that, Evie. It's a little harder, I think, both given the timetable and the restrictions of the pandemic. So again, I keep imagining how things have been done for the last 10 years here, and everything's different. But I do urge for the next meeting, which will be, again, a public. So first off, there will be a time for people to speak in public and even grandstand. That's the public hearing. So even if we don't provide the speaking opportunity at the next public information meeting, there are going to be 2 more public hearings for people to speak their mind, and the town will hear them. So if we don't provide it at the next meeting, doesn't mean it's never going to happen. So that's one thought. I do recommend for our next public information meeting, which is going to have a lot more detailed info, that we have the info out there accessible a week or 2 ahead of time. That is, if we, the use tables and the maps with the actual boundaries on them need to be available for public scrutiny ahead of time so they can formulate their questions, because there are going to be a lot more details in the next meeting. So that's one thing I would urge or recommend. And I would love to have the meetings around town. I just don't know about the timetable. Like I said, I think I wrote one note. My original thought was, okay, Speedsville, over the next 10 days, we're going to have 3 workshops to consider the possible use table for Speedsville, and anyone who's interested, come here. And then there's another 10 days where we work on several sessions for the rural ag zone. I admit we can't do that. I think given the pandemic, given the timetables, and also given the expertise needed. So I think we have to do what we were charged to do, which is to come up with those with as much public feedback and information as we can, put it out there, get another public round of comments, information, and then put it out the public hearing after that. I think that though it feels like we're kind of like cutting the public out, I mean, that's our best. You never can reach everybody. And it's not just the survey. People could write an email to Jean, and actually should. And I will say that right now, I think that we don't have a representative sample of the town, because I sent a note to, about 30 or 40 people I know in Caroline and urged them to respond. So I'm sure right now our responses are heavily swayed towards people that know Bill Podolka in Caroline. So it's not at all a representative sample. So I hope that more people will, submit stuff in the next week or so. But I think we have to do the best we can, ask for public input, craft things, be open to suggestions, don't be stuck with what we had as preconceived notions, adapt based on public feedback as best we can. I believe there'll be announcements on the town listserv for showing people how they can also give us more information the next week or 2. And no matter what we do, whether it be a referendum or other workshops or whatever, you're always going to get a small fraction of the people in the town to pay attention and chip in. So all we can do is do the best we can and go forward. Specific question on CAFOs. CAFOs are a trigger in the existing site plan law and the revised law. I know that came up. Nan, I was curious about your answer. Is there ag and markets law that sort of supersedes site plan review the town would do? So the town is somewhat constrained in its actual site plan?
Yeah. And, I think that the way you have it now with CAFO requiring a full-blown site plan review would be frowned upon if it got to the state for a review. The whole purpose of a New York State certified ag district is to promote farming that is done according to accepted farming practices. So the ag and markets 25AA law really is designed to not allow communities to over-regulate farms. The CAFO in and of itself, which for those of you who don't know, is a concentrated animal feed operation, is a farm has to be of a certain size and have so many animals. And when they reach that point, they have to go through the CAFO process that's reviewed. A whole farm management plan is reviewed by the Department of Environmental Conservation, and that looks at manure management and soil management and erosion and how they're dealing with wetlands and streams and things like that. So for the town to have a site plan review of a CAPO, or at least a full-blown site plan review of a CAPO, is not something that is normally accepted. However, the state in its review and its guidance on ag districts clearly recognizes that there are some aspects of large farming that the community should be and has the right to look at. And so they kind of promote what's called a modified site plan review that looks at very narrow topics that are of community importance, that might be setbacks from streams or location of manure pits, or, there's some of those kind of set things, a very limited slice of it. And so I am concerned about the risk that it puts the town at, to be honest with you, about requiring a CAPO to come for site plan review.
Right, so that's wording you can sort of either fix or advise us on in this next iteration or something when you give us the full
Yes.
draft.
Yes.
Let me ask a question. Like the last time I ever really remember thinking about this, the number of animals was somewhere around 900. Is that right?
No, I think it's 200. And it depends on the animal. It depends on, whether you're talking about rabbits or you're talking about, it's mostly livestock. It wouldn't be rabbits. That was a bad example, but yeah. So I think it's above 200. Like if you have the dairy farm, CAPOs would be above 200.
Okay. I know what I think I'm thinking of, and the governor, the former governor changed something that made rules easier up to 900 animals from 200. He made something easier, but I don't remember what that was exactly. So
Yeah,
I'm not gonna.
I don't know. I'd have to look that up.
Okay, don't worry about it. I think before I went to Bill, I was trying to answer a question that Michelle had started, which was some of this conversation happened afterwards. And I would say, yes, a lot of the questions really that I saw and I talked to people about were not so much about the overlays, but were more really about where the hamlets were. Maybe the hamlets should be bigger, for instance. Maybe they didn't, some of the lines didn't include what people really thought of as Brooksondale, for instance, or all of Beesmer. We had a question about why wasn't not the town of Caroline, but the hamlet of Caroline, why wasn't that included? And my answer was that most of the others had some kind of a public building, and we didn't see that anymore there. But maybe that's not a sufficient answer. So, but that did come up. And then there were a lot of questions about development, about, are you against development? Why are you against development? Development can bring taxes to the community and it provides housing that's much needed. That was sort of a lot of the conversation that I took part of anyway. And also I had some specific questions from people about things like, this is what I want to do. Would zoning make this impossible? And what I was talking, I don't see zoning making that impossible. However, if you're going to start like a campground, essentially, you have to think about bathrooms, and you got to figure out what you're going to do about that. And that's going to trigger some issues that would have to be considered even if we didn't have zoning. So those are the kind of things that came up. I see Will's hand up.
Yeah, on Sunday's link with the questions, I really thought there were a lot of good questions asked. And I really appreciated the question about why aren't there farmers on the zoning commission? And I have to say that in a lot of the discussion, I feel really uneasy myself because we're not hearing a farming perspective. And I wonder if we actually could do something about that. I think it's important to have something more than the 3-minute privilege of the floor perspective from that community. And I noticed, like, I follow the sheep and goat listserv that Cornell runs. And, you know, I noticed that there are sheep farmers in Brookton, well, not necessarily Brookendale, but Caroline, who are actually very knowledgeable in their community. And we never have heard from them as far as I can tell. Besides, you know, the folks we know who do other types of farming. So my question is, could we find a way to get some specific farm feedback on what we're looking at, what we're proposing, and something more than just, you know, show up and comment for a couple of minutes? Thanks.
Thank you. One of the things that, I don't know the name of the young woman who was there yesterday when we talked about the farm committee. And she asked you. Yeah, I just didn't know her.
Yeah, Catherine.
Catherine Goldberg was there and said, you know, I'm looking for people to serve on the farm committee. Perhaps the farm committee is somebody we could go to and ask for them to look at this specifically. So let's talk about that. And also, who did you say was on the committee?
John Barber.
John Barber.
Just Don Barber.
John Barber's on the committee. He also let us know today that he doesn't have a lot of bandwidth. He's building a house, and he basically said, you know, I don't have a lot of bandwidth for this right now. So.
Okay. Who has I not been back to? But Ernie and Bruce. Yeah.
So commenting on yesterday's meetings, I didn't engage a lot of people, but basically I was at one of the Hamlet maps, and I think that the question of why are the hamlets so small was kind of brought up on several occasions, and there's a lot of concern or question about why are there two colors of hamlets, which I tried to explain, but I don't think I was very successful at really kind of saying, you know, exactly why this would be, because we haven't decided. And then I got some feedback about, you know, prime farmland should just be off the table for any development whatsoever. And then I got some comments about, you know, why are you people forcing zoning down our throats? And so it was kind of all over the place. I don't think there was a consensus on either side of this issue. And it will be interesting to see how we go forward from here. But I agree with Bill wholeheartedly that we really do not have the time or resources to you know, go out and physically try to engage every person in this town in this process. So it's an imperfect world, and we're part of it. And I think that we continue to do the best that we can. Although I do feel that this time constraint that is on us is artificially imposed, and we need not be beholden to it if it doesn't result in a good product in the end. That's it.
And Bruce.
Ernie, did anybody say much to you about commercial? Because I remember I was over there about the commercial zone.
Yeah, I was trying to elicit people's responses as to whether or not we should have a commercial zone, and I think that the general consensus I was getting was, well, if it's for, you know, these bigger businesses, you know, big being undefined, we don't want them, period. So why make a place for them? But, you know, at the same token, there were people who were saying, well, why don't we extend the, you know, the hamlet of Brooktondale to encompass all of Beesmer and, you know, part of Route 79 up there, you know, into a more, light commercial zone. If we, you know, if we quit, you know, calling these things hamlets because it's so darn cute, and call them what most zoning ordinance was called them, as, you know, light commercial districts or what have you. You know, we might, you know, start to get around some of the obstacles to drawing lines where they really need to be drawn. Enough.
I have to say, I love that. I see Evie, and then we have to come back to Bruce, I think.
I was also in a couple of conversations, probably 3 different folks about commercial, and there was general agreement that light commercial and conversations led to things like breweries and larger restaurant type things, and sort of something that would bring more visitation to the town. Should and could, and they were quite fond of the idea of that being located on the Route 79 corridor, and that could Slaterville and West Slaterville be expanded to include some of that. And even, you know, one suggestion was to swallow up some of the farmland, which is not being farmed. So whether that's viable or not, that was a suggestion.
Okay, Bruce, and then Bill.
There was a large number of people at the Sunday meeting who expressed that they were very unhappy not being able to ask questions in person, stand up, discuss what was going on. So there was a lot of people that said that. As far as commercial goes, it was about along the lines of what Evie said. There was some that if we did have to have commercial, why wasn't it on 79 where the majority of commercial businesses already are? The other thing was, I feel we really do need to have another meeting, and maybe we could reverse the procedure, because if we had, unless we've already picked zones and drawn maps and done things, but if we hadn't done that yet, if we went the other way and let them look at maps and discuss what we did, they'd have a much better picture of, well, maybe we should expand it, maybe we shouldn't, and we'd get some better input that way. The other thing is, I don't feel we're under any kind of time constraint whatsoever, because I talked to the town lawyer before I got into this, and he told me point blank, he told the town board that if everything went perfect, it would be a minimum of 2 years. And he said things won't go perfect, so you're looking more like 2.5 years. So as far as I can see, we're on schedule to do this in record time. But like Ernie, if we can't do this right, then and represent the most people that we can in this town, when we've only had 100 people and there's 3,600 people that live in this town, I think we need more input. That's it.
Okay, we've had very little response so far to the survey that we put out. I'm sorry, Michelle, I see your hand up, and I see Bill too. Bill.
Yeah, and yes, I agree that we need to sort of push getting information from the public more. And so I know things are in the works to maybe get a listserv announcement out that will at least hit some people in town, but people will show, you know, let's start a phone tree, whatever, tell them to get feedback to us. Because I think that's, you know, I email, let's say 40 people I knew in town. So I recommend you guys do the same. I don't, you know, that's not the end of the world, obviously, but yes, all the more the merrier. The comments I actually had were, so the planning board grappled with this idea of like reaching out to the specific interest groups when we were doing the comp plan. And farmers is the classic example. And so I have a lot of sympathy for that. But we grappled with things, okay, well, if it's them, then why did they get preferential treatment? Maybe we should then be having a special meeting where we talk to commercial developers or something. And what about this other group? And well, who are the farmers anyway? Because sometimes there's little farmers who just do it a little bit versus the big, you know, sort of traditional farming. So it got into a big conundrum. So I am not unsympathetic to trying to reach out, particularly if there's a farming committee for the town. We called out as farming is very important, to the rural agricultural heritage of the town. But it does lead to a bit of a conundrum of, well, why does that group get such special treatment and not me, and not the fact that I want to, represent the commercial interests or something else. So I think we need to tread cautiously in terms of reaching out to specific interest groups, or else cast a very wide net that way. And farming is important to the rural heritage of Caroline. It is important to helping preserve the open space and the rural feel of Caroline. But so are landowners who don't farm, but also don't develop their properties. And that is also an issue we faced on the planning board, that open space is preserved by various means, either by keeping something forested, by keeping it field, by keeping it shrub, whatever. And so the solution we came up with is the town should look at preferential tax treatment via a conservation easement if you promise to keep your land undeveloped. That's a proposal in the comp plan. It's taken a bunch of work to flesh it out. I don't know if we're going to go there or not, but it isn't just farmers. There are actually remarkably few large farmers, large farms left in Caroline. A handful of active, traditional, commodity product agriculture goes on in Caroline. There's a good amount, to some extent, of part-time farming, or people who do farming and something else, or a few sheep, or whatever. And I really thought that figuring out what all was going on would be an important task for the planning board, which is understandably gotten derailed by the fact that we're very busy here on the zoning commission. But I think that knowing who to reach out to as the farmers is actually not an obvious question either. And so anyway, enough said on that. I think it's not a bad idea, but I just think we need to tread cautiously. In terms of the hamlets, I think we should look at the hamlet boundaries. That's what I think we need to do over the next month. And consistent with our discussion the other week, that was something that Barbara suggested is, well, maybe what we need to do is expand, rather than set aside some other place non-contiguous that's going to be this denser housing, we should essentially have the hamlets engulf more of the territory near them. That's a possible solution. All I've been arguing all along is that, there is going to be residential growth and commercial growth in Caroline, particularly residential growth. And if we don't want it to happen every which where, which is a possible answer, if we want to preserve large open spaces, then we need to provide ways for that growth to happen through conservation subdivisions in the rural area, but also through denser housing elsewhere where it's appropriate, because people do want to live here. And so our tough job is to grapple with where that's going to be. And so I do like this notion that maybe the hamlet should be bigger. That's one way to accomplish that goal. And so I certainly intend to spend some time driving around, looking at the edge of those hamlets over the next few weeks. Anyway, so that's all.
Thanks, Michelle and Barbara. Welcome. I'll tell you what we've been talking about. The two meetings, the Thursday and Sunday, and what our reactions were to them, and what things came up that we feel that we really need to think about more. So I will come to you after Michelle speaks.
Yeah, I guess Bill really said a lot of what I would like to say. So I agree with him on, I can't think what I disagree with him on right now. And I guess what I was going to start saying though was,
I'm sure there's something.
Probably, but, we can talk about this for years, and we could probably poll every single person in Caroline, and we would get 3,600 different opinions. And I really feel like we are being very open to whoever wants to contact us. So if people don't feel like they're getting information, I'm just going to say this, at being one of those personality types, INTJ type, and if you've ever done that thing, you'll know what that is. It's really up to the town to get this information. We're doing the best we can, but I don't think we have an obligation to talk about this for 2 years. I think we have to just come up with something, present it. Then at the hearings, people can talk about it and argue about it. But I think it's a two-way street. We're doing the best we can to get information and put it out there. And likewise, people have to contact Jean or, get all the information they can. That's your duty as a citizen. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Barb?
Yes, hello, thank you. Thanks for the brief update, and sorry to be joining you late. Just a few comments. One is that I appreciate all that the zoning commission and the consultants have been doing to get the word out to the community. You know, this is pretty classic government decision-making, public decision-making, public involvement, that people get more vocal and more interested in participating as the decisions get more specific, as the information gets more specific. Throughout, the Zoning Commission has publicized our meetings. We've had privilege of the floor opportunities for every one of our meetings, where very few people have taken advantage of the opportunity to share their comments with the Zoning Commission. There have been updates in the Brookendale newsletter and the town newsletter and other newsletters that have gone out. So I personally am convinced that the Zoning Commission has made a very, very good effort to be transparent and to provide opportunities for public comment and public input, and to consider very carefully and deliberatively the input that we've received on an ongoing basis throughout this process. So I think it was great that we had the two public meetings, one Zoom and one in person. And I think it's quite appropriate that we plan to have another public meeting when we have more specific information about the proposed uses for the various districts or zoning districts within the town. I think all of that is appropriate. And I believe that we will have more people even who express some interest and express some comments once there is more specific information to comment about, and people see how the zoning district decisions are going to be more pertinent to their own local areas. That's the way that public involvement works. It's a very classic example, through many empirical studies. That's how people get involved, more involved as the decisions and ideas get more specific pertaining to their own lives. On the other point, I just want to kind of reiterate something that I've been saying throughout this, that I hope the Zoning Commission will be future oriented. And rather than thinking about drawing boundaries around things that exist already, think about drawing the district boundaries for the various districts around how we, reflective of comments that we've received from the Caroline residents and citizens, envision the desired future boundaries, the desired future for the town of Caroline as reflected in the comprehensive plan. So again, I'll just encourage us to be future oriented with our boundaries, our district boundaries, and not just focusing on what is there now. So thanks for the opportunity, Jean.
That's great. Tim, is there anything you'd like to say?
I was just going to mention regarding this concern about public contact that I hope that everyone remembers, not just on the Zoning Commission, but who's listening, that this is a process that has been slowly ongoing now for over 5 years. It began with very, very complex public output regarding the comprehensive plan, which did involve all of these small hamlet community meetings. It was followed by the task force, which had its own planner and did a lot of preemptive work for this. And now the incredible work that you all have been doing on the task force. So I just don't want you to lose sight of the longevity of this. This is really a process that's been going on. And there's been a political process actually as well. There was a very, very heated election 2 years ago. These issues of land use development were at the core of that election. There was another election 3 weeks ago, and these land use issues were at the forefront of that election. So I think that there are a lot of things to inform what you're doing that I hope will make you feel more at ease regarding the pressures that are now likely to come upon you as things get closer. But I just thought maybe a little bit of overview wouldn't be a bad idea right now. So I didn't mean to interrupt.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks. I think I certainly, really feel like I got good feedback from people who attended. I think there is frustration. There are people who, want to have a referendum. Well, you can't, it's the law. And there were people who very much want what I would consider fairly strict zoning laws in the sense of, dark skies, for instance, that's not something that everyone's going to love. I love it, but not everyone's going to love the idea. Because you have to, you might have to think about the kind of lighting you put outside, et cetera. And for commercial businesses, that can be an issue. So, and I absolutely agree with Barbara. This is going to get more and more heated as it gets closer. And there's something real for people to respond to. We're asking people for their opinions. I would like to suggest that we use the Bitly questionnaire that Nan had written and try to get that out to more people using the listservs and the town listserv and the Brooktondale listserv and others. We could offer it to fire departments and others and ask them to send it out so that we could get some responses to that. It would be a way of getting, just reaching more people.
Using different listservs.
Yes, yeah. And we could do that over the next couple of weeks. So that's, I think, one way that we can do more outreach and see what we get. Besides Bill's, very personal way that we should all do as well, which is to make our friends do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I watched the tape. Because I believe Bill was on the meeting when the board was discussing picking this commission, and one of the things that, I'm not sure if it was Tim or who said it, part of it was that people on this commission were supposed to talk to as many of the people they know as they could.
Right.
Like Bill cut 30 people or whatever. So I haven't done that myself yet, thinking that maybe I should have, but then when I watched that tape of that meeting again, I said, well, it was kind of like, that's part of what we're tasked with.
Right.
Get some more input with different people. And just myself, I haven't done it a lot, but.
Yeah, I think, I hope we will do that. And I think Michelle says she's told her neighbors. That's good. So we will, is there anything else anybody wants to say about this part of the agenda, which was looking at what we've done? But I'd like to think that next is work to do, that we have to do.
I just want to make a point of that. If you send that survey out to other people out of context with the maps, that they might not know how to answer those questions. So if you're going to, say a broader, if you're going to disconnect the survey from the presentations that we made, you ought to have a link or some way that they could view the map so that they know what they're answering the questions about.
Okay, we'll do that.
And that actually was something I was about to ask, which I know the PowerPoint is there, but Nan or Jean, whoever, do we have electronic versions of the maps that are in that PowerPoint that we could post? So you've given those to the town already, Nan? Okay, so yes, I would suggest strongly that we have links to those maps right there next to the link to the survey on the zoning commission webpage.
Good, and I think also the FAQ, because that's up there
Right.
now. And that would provide people who didn't go to a meeting an opportunity to read something. Or to look at the thing.
Is it feasible to put links directly into the survey so people aren't switching back and forth? Have to go out of the survey and then come back into the survey?
I don't know about a link. I believe I can put, I don't know. I'll have to look and see if that would be a link or the actual map would be in there. I'd have to look at the logistics of that, but that could be something that we could could look into. I just don't know the answer to whether it would be the actual map that would be in the survey or a link to a map to another site. I don't know if it can link back and forth,
Okay,
but I'll look into that.
good. Thank you, Nan. And Nan, is there anything
Thanks.
else you'd like to say about the meetings?
No, I'm just listening to, you know, your impressions of it. I think that you know, those were all relevant and valid points, but it's then more of what you just were looking towards. Where do you go from here and how do you move forward? So
Yes.
I would say that's a lead in for you, you know, to, I think that you're at a point in your work where, you know, how do you make the decisions that you need to make moving forward? And there's really like 3 areas that the zoning commission needs to really offer direction on. A lot of these other things, I think that we can, you know, between your discussions on the commercial uses and your kind of philosophy on the kind of, you know, how low density housing and those types of things you've had discussion on, but I think the boundaries need to be determined. I think your the uses, while we've talked about the uses, ultimately we have to decide on not just a use list, but what process those uses will go through. So are some uses going to be permitted as of right that they don't need to go to the review board? Are they going to need just site plan review? Or are they going to need, or if you want to use a special use permit? So the boundaries have to be decided, that the use / process needs to be decided. And one thing that really hasn't been discussed hardly at all yet, which is very important, is the dimensions. And that is, do you want to set a density or minimum lot sizes or both? Do you want to set other kinds of dimensional kinds of standards, like the amount of lot coverage that buildings could take up on any given lot? Do you want to talk about setbacks? Do you want to talk about building height? We've talked about size limits for commercial buildings, and I think there seems to be a general agreement that there should be a size limit. But we haven't talked about some of those other dimensions. So I think those 3 areas, you can kind of focus your efforts onto making some decisions. I mean, the other pieces of the zoning flow from those big decisions. So I think those are, you know, really are the next step. And I guess my professional opinion is that I think it's very hard for people who don't work with zoning on a day-to-day basis to be able to say, oh, I think we should do this, or oh, I think we should do that, or oh, I think the boundary should be here. I just think that most people they don't think about those things, and it's difficult for them to kind of envision it. I think that you will get more input back from the public when you have something specific to show them. And then they'll say, I like it, I don't like it, or here's some suggestions on how to improve it. I just, I guess, you know, I feel that
Ernie, I see you, yes. Well,
I-
I'll let Ernie
I
go.
guess I just wanted to say, Nan, you know, we're in the same boat. So why don't you draft something that we can react to, so that we aren't trying to pull, you know, setback distances and lot coverages and this and that out of there. It's just, it's too hard to develop something out of you know, burns here. We need some fabric that we can react to.
I can do that if you're ready for me to do that. I can give you
I-
something that then you react to and you say, well, we don't like that, or yeah, this is a great idea. I'm ready to do that.
Okay.
I-
Well, I
I'm-
think that what's going to happen is that we're gonna differ in opinions, but we're also nice to each other that we will never come up with a consensus. I mean, we've got to, you know, quit herding cats here and get all of the frogs into one wheelbarrow. And I think that that's time for you to step up and do that.
I agree with Ernie as far as the dimensioning stuff. I feel totally at sea with that. I think that this commission can and should do some work on the uses. As Nan suggested, what's the process? What has site plan review? What doesn't? I think we might be able to make some progress on that. That would help you.
We've talked about all that stuff, you know, I mean, we haven't gone through absolutely every one of them, but we've
Yeah.
gone through a lot of those. And
Agreed.
I
And
think
I think we've done a lot of that. So you gotta go bang, 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 finish it up. That's what I would say.
But I think that Nan could take that, put it into, okay, this is what I heard, and then we can tell her if that she didn't hear right, rather than, you know, kind of picking it all up and going through it all again.
Yeah,
You know,
I don't disagree. I think the one area that I think you are at this stage most equipped to offer comment on is the boundaries of the hamlet.
Yes,
Uh,
and I think
And
we
I,
need to
because
have
you know the area,
an in-person
and-
meeting.
you know, we've given you what, from our analysis, we've already given you a recommendation, and they may not be right. They may need to be changed, but I think that that is one area you can offer meaningful input. And I have no problem putting everything that I know from what you've told me and what I've heard in the community and from my experiences of working with other rural communities into a draft that then you, like you said, Ernie, then you can start taking it, you can see it in a concrete form, and you could say, yep, that's what we want, or nope, that's not what we want.
Okay, I move that we vote to have Nan do that for us.
There's a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? I see a second. I can't see everyone right now because there's some stuff on the screen, but
I'm sorry.
I
do I have
second.
a discussion?
Can I just ask,
Yes, you can have, this is perfectly about that.
Nan, the first was boundaries, what was the second? Uses and what else? Context?
Uses and special use permits and review, and whether you need a review board or.
Right,
that
it's
kind of thing.
it's the use table that also identifies the process that use would need to go through, if any.
Okay.
So it's all in one. And then the third major
Third was
part would be
dimensions.
dimension.
Mentioned
Yeah.
density, size, yep.
Okay. So I have a motion on the floor and I have a second. Edie, is your point to the motion?
It was a request, and that the request is that, and I'm not sure what the Roberts Rules order of this is, that I would like to see the boundaries enlarged. So I don't know if that's appropriate to
Okay,
put
I
in.
think we're actually going to discuss boundaries ourselves. But I think what we have on here is what Ernie was saying is, the motion is that Nan work on putting together something that we can react to, probably about uses particularly and dimensions, because I think we're out of our depth there.
Yep.
I know I am for sure about the depth. I'm
Maps
stuck
are-
with the
maps are
dimensions. I
not-
don't know how big anything is.
We'll take care of the maps.
Yep.
Nan
we'll-
take
we'll
care
work on the
of
maps. So if that's the motion, do I have any more discussion of that?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the motion.
Bill?
All right, so basically I will speak in favor of the motion. However, I do think that we can have a little more conversation about some of these details. I'm not sure how soon Nan's gonna like run away and work on all this, if it's like starting tomorrow, or if we have today's meeting and maybe next meeting to give her a little more feedback. The areas I have particular information about is what I talked about was renewable energy siting. The solar siting law divides systems into small, medium, and large. And the battery law has small and large. And I think from my own understanding of the zoning commission, I think all small systems would be allowed anywhere in town of either type. And I think the large solar system would only be in the ag rural, but I think it is a very open question. I don't want to necessarily set Nan the task of trying to figure out what are these medium scale systems that are under 2.5 acres, but more than 25 kilowatts. I mean,
Okay.
this is something I think we could give her some feedback on. So I'm in favor of the motion, but I do think we might have a few items we ought to discuss as a committee this week and next week to help her out.
That was sort of the plan from, well, we'll just speak to this and then we'll have a vote. That was sort of the plan, that we were gonna meet again next week, and Dan was then gonna write, because why should she have a Christmas? Was our feeling. And then when we come back in January, we will have something to look at. So with that on the table, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Was that opposed an aye or no? That's a,
That was a late aye.
okay. All in favor in that case. That was a unanimous decision. Thank you. I love motions. They're one of my favorite things.
So let's talk about the next motion, which is to have an in-person meeting with maps, paper maps that we can all stand around and talk about and argue about and freely give and take, because if we don't do it that way, it's never going to happen.
So that's the
Draw back.
suggestion for perhaps next Monday.
In the Brookton's Market tent.
We could, well, we could meet here. We could try to meet at a fire hall, which is a larger space. If we could get it, or we could meet at the Brookton Market tent and see if they can get the heat on.
If we meet here, we can project onto the,
We could project the map onto the thing as well, which would be handy. It'd be very nice to be able to have a map that you could blow up certain areas of, if you were talking specifically about the
we should do
hamlets.
it here so the public can remote.
Yes, if we do it here and we can, if people can come in, that would be great. Or how do people feel about that?
I'm all for it.
I like the idea of doing it there.
Okay. So let's
So-
do that here.
And
Okay.
if you do it in the town hall, it can also be shared to those of us who can't come for health reasons.
Yes. Yes, and we can, if we do it here, we'll have the ability to Zoom it as well, which would be handy
And necessary.
and necessary. So we will do that.
Do we have a
Um,
date on when that might be?
That's next Tuesday. That's our next Tuesday meeting,
14.
the 14th. So, and that would be great if we can look at the boundaries, and it would be great if people have the opportunity this week or the coming weekend to really drive around and look at the hamlets. I love that Ernie feels that that's a very cute word, because it is. And also, as you're out there, look at the hamlet of Caroline, because that has come up as a question. Let's talk a little bit more then about, that was a motion. We have a second for that motion. That we do that next week. That was Bruce. Any other discussion? All in favor of that motion, that we try to meet as much in person as we can next week and look at the maps? All say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Great. Okay. Let me write down my second motion, so we'll remember that we had it.
We have 2, wow.
I know. It's very exciting.
Trick.
No, we have to get 3 for hat trick.
Oh, geez. Well, I guess you're-
Jane, one question, maybe you'll write it. What will be the health protocol for the meeting?
Wear a mask. Have your, I think, have you all been vaccinated and vaccinated?
Yeah.
Yes,
I'll have my booster by then.
great. Good. Okay, and if you don't feel well, stay home. So Nan has mentioned these things, the boundaries, the uses, the dimensions. I had also put on the agenda the whole idea of commercial. I think we have to have some more of a discussion about that. We have, my sense is we have this belief about, that it's a kind of a general belief about the formula businesses, that if we allow them, and we sort of have to allow them, that they should be of a limited size and they should have design standards. Is that where we are? Am I correct in thinking that? I see a fair amount of nodding.
I don't
Nancy,
see how we can do anything else than that, because anything else would be problematic.
Right, so that's what I'm hearing, is so, Nan, if you're hearing that too, then work that into something that sounds like that.
Okay, I'd like to make a couple of suggestions. I mean,
Sure.
can we outlaw drive-in facilities. I mean, that is, I mean, your typical McDonald's, I looked this up, is 3,500 square feet, which is
Right.
not a very big building. But, so, eliminating uses like this on the basis of square footage is going to be a little dicey, because, a restaurant, has to have a certain amount of space in order to have tables and one thing and another. And so if you eliminated all McDonald's, you would eliminate all restaurants. So if we eliminated drive-through facilities, would we be kind of cutting the cord on a lot of the reasons we don't like these things?
I happen
Some
remember
communities,
that.
yeah, some communities have prohibited drive-through facilities. I can think of several examples where they have done that.
In the town, the Dunkin' Donut that is at Judd Falls Corner, when that was first built, that was, and actually it was not allowed to be a drive-in. It was, you had to walk into the store. They then changed that a couple of years ago, but that was in the town of Ithaca. That's how, and that was what the zoning officers did. That was what the zoning law was at that time.
We also have to remember that a lot of businesses only survived with drive-through through COVID.
Well, that doesn't mean takeout. It doesn't mean
Right.
that you can't have someone pull into a parking spot and run in and take takeout. A drive-through is a specific structure that's part of the building, like a bank, or like, a CVS drive-through. That's not the same thing as, a restaurant that allows for pickup, for instance.
Okay. I'll tell you that there are places in Florida where there are drive-through funeral homes. I'm not recommending that.
So that would eliminate banks, drive-through.
Yeah, well,
Monty Python.
there you go.
I'm not dead yet.
I'm not dead yet, exactly. Another thing that has come up in discussion, let me just say billboards and then I'll go to Bill. Billboards had come up as a discussion item that we might want to think about because we have not really had a discussion about that. Bill.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, the form of business restrictions, I may be on board with a blanket no drive-throughs. That may be, I agree it can't be on size. That wasn't the point. The form of business restrictions are aimed at the negative aspects of a form of business, which is different than a franchise, but it is a business that's specific, like a McDonald's has every single building, look at that goddamn same, right? Every customer is wearing the same uniform, every product is the same product in every single McDonald's. And as it turns out, probably maybe because of that, maybe, but who knows what, they have a really high turnover rate, right? There's a high rate of abandonment of the buildings. And so what form of business restrictions tend to get after is we're going to limit how dense they can be, right? Maybe one per X square miles. So there aren't too many of them. We're going to limit the fact that they have to look more like our town. And we're going to, as we did in our town, we're going to limit the fact that if they go out of business, they got to take care of their mess. They got to clean it up. And I'm fine with that. I think with these, that's the minimum we should do. Maybe we should have a ban on all drive-throughs. I'm open to hearing about it, but I'm not sold that that's the right answer. Because if they were to look just like a McDonald's but not have the drive-through window, I'm not sure I'd still
Well,
like
it's
it.
part of the answer. I'm just saying.
It might well be.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a good, clever thought.
The other thing that I had on my agenda was to talk about the junkyard law and the adult use law. I read the adult use law, which was amusing because it was actually typewritten. So it was, I think it was done in the early 90s, but it was typewritten, which I found fascinating. No one had a Selectric? What's going on? Basically what it was trying to do was to restrict the location of adult entertainment or movies, nudity, kumas essentially, in the town of Caroline. And the way it did it was to say it can't be within a certain number of feet of various other things. So churches, schools, I think it wasn't allowed in the hamlet, is my recollection. It was only allowed outside of hamlets. That was the adult. So if in terms of if we are trying to go with one law that has all of these things in it, do we want to put this adult law into the zoning thing is I think the question, or does that stay out? That's the question that I had. Bruce?
I read it, but it was quite some time ago, and what struck me about that particular law was it could be closer to a school than it could to other things like a bar room or this or that and other thing,
Yeah,
which kind of threw me off. So I would think that law would have to be rewritten somehow anyway.
I don't know if the town board wants us to consider putting that in, or you just want to leave it there alone. Maybe that's something you guys should think about.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
I'd be interested.
No,
in-
at the very least, it should be referred to. You know, a lot of communities put it in the zoning, but you would need to have a reference to it. So I would imagine that the use table would say, you know, adult use, and then instead of saying, you know, it's allowed here or allowed there, it would be see local law 1 of 1990 or whatever the law was. So at the very least, it needs to be coordinated and referred to.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, my reaction would be that it be integrated into it, because it's a land use
it is a land
thing,
use, yeah.
so.
And the other thing is, I could not find a junkyard law, or at least it's not called a junkyard law, and so I couldn't find it. Who knows where it is?
Yeah, I can find it.
You can find it?
Mhm.
Mark will send me the reference and then I will read it.
Yeah, I'd like to read it too.
Yeah, so send me the reference and I will make sure everyone gets it, because I just didn't know where it was.
Thank you.
And I looked through a bunch of other things, but it may have been so beautifully worded that I didn't recognize it.
Yeah, you know, and while you're on that same question goes to whether you want to integrate the solar law, whether you want to integrate the cellular tower law. You know, they have to be at least referenced and coordinated. And, you know, most communities that add them all together do it so it's kind of like a one-stop shop. You got everything all in one place.
Yeah.
But I can also tell you that when people look at zoning laws, unfortunately, often the first thing and the only thing they look at is they'll say, oh my gosh, it's 100 pages long. And so the more you integrate to make it a more usable document, the longer it gets. And then the more people say, holy cow, you got 100 pages of zoning for our town, which, you know, that's the way people are. And so I think you
It's
have
gonna
to
be
weigh,
50 anyway.
yeah, you have to weigh ease of use and, you know, having it coordinated versus the length of the document.
Okay, we will talk about that. Tim?
Oh, I was just gonna ask Nan if it makes any difference in terms of the simplicity of revising a law, so that would it make it easier for the town board, for example, to revise either the solar law or the cell tower law if it weren't within zoning? You hear what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah, no, it would, because it would be the same process. You would have to have a public hearing and you would have to have county planning board review and you'd have to do seeker. So from a process point of view, I don't think it really matters.
Okay. Bill has his hand up.
Yeah, just real quick, and we did face this conundrum when drafting the solar law, and I knew the site plan law was out there too, and you know, the solar law is kind of like site plan. I don't know the best way to go, and I looked at it as, hey, someone's got to harmonize this down the ways, and Nan, it looks like it might be you. I think that with the way the solar law is structured, it would work reasonably well to have a reference in the zoning law where the zoning law says what size system is allowed in which zones. So it might say small scale solar allowed in, you know, all zones C, you know, for it's a permit process, right? Medium scale solar are allowed with a special use permit in hamlet zones, C, you know, review procedure, you know, so we could do something like that
Right.
relatively
Yes, you could.
easily, the way
Yep.
it's structured, I think.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, it's just like the adult use law. The solar law would have a line, or the solar use would have a line in the use table, small, medium, or large, or however it's defined, with where they would be allowed, and then with the note, see local law 1 of 2021 or whatever. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think really, yes, they're absolutely, they need to be integrated, but whether they need to be physically in one document is where your decision should lie. They will be integrated. It's just a matter of whether you want them all housed in one zoning law.
I want to suggest from a political point of view that it would make sense to me not to integrate them all in terms of wording in this first document, so that you have a slimmer document for people to read, and you have the references to things that have already been passed. And then 2 years after zoning is passed or approved, in whatever way it is, someone can put them all together in one,
If that's advisable.
if that is advisable. But that's my,
Partially
For my years-
residential.
that's from my years of being a politician and political advisor. That is what I would say. Because you don't want to give people a 100-page document, because they won't read it. They'll just roll it up into a thing and gesticulate with it. So those are all the things that I had on my list. Is there anything that I have not mentioned that we should think about, that we want particularly to discuss either on the 14th after we're looking at maps, or that we're going to ask Nan to give us some specific guidance about? Barbara?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this was mentioned in the conversation that just happened, but just revisiting the design standards that that were prepared by the task force. So the revised site plan review law that included design standards. And I think for that, we ought to think very seriously about whether that remains standalone or gets incorporated into the zoning law. I think that's a different issue than, for example, solar siting. My recommendation with that would be to include the design standards within the zoning law, but I'm certainly open to other advice and guidance on that.
I would take that a step further and advise that the entire site plan law, both the process and the design component of it, be an integral part of the zoning law, because the site plan is such an important component of the review process. So that is one that I would fully integrate in. And that's my recommendation, rather than having it as a standalone.
We
Great.
can always do something in the versions on the website and that are in print, where it's clear to people that some parts have already been passed. Because I think that's what you want to do. You want to do something with a footnote or something that says, this is already law.
Except in this current case, I think the site plan law and design standards we would like Nan to incorporate have not been passed, and were
Okay.
intentionally not yet passed because they were waiting for
Okay.
zoning.
So, right, exactly so. I am going to ask as part of a sort of a homework assignment that not necessarily for next week, but before we meet again in January and begin to look at that, I hope everyone will have the opportunity to go back and look at the comprehensive plan. And especially those of you who did not write it, like myself, and just really feel that I have a real handle on it, because I think that's going to be critically important, since whatever we do needs to be so aligned with that. We actually have about 20 minutes left. Is there anything else that anyone can think of?
I wanted to say a few things.
Sure, go ahead, Mark.
This is Mark. I just wanted to say, I thought the 2 meetings were really good, and I want to thank everybody on the zoning commission and Nan for, all the hard work, and I think it was really, I think both meetings were really productive and constructive for letting people know what you're doing and where the process is at. And so thank you. And I also, thanks for the work on getting the Q&A together, the signage. Thank you, Bill. And Evie, thank you for tending the door yesterday and helping me with that. I really appreciated that. The Q&A, I saw the chat going, and it mirrored some thoughts I had. So it turns out that some knucklehead supervisor forgot to bring the hard copies of the Q&A to the Brookendale.
I mean, the FAQ.
The FAQ, yeah, so, and so I think the FAQ, I don't know, I mean, this is a question for you, if those would be something that would be appropriate, we could put those out with the questionnaire boxes.
Mhm.
And I was also thinking that I could include the FAQ in the fourth quarter newsletter.
Oh, that would be great.
Send out to the town, so,
That would be fabulous.
yeah, so.
Yeah, and I think also, I think that that is the kind of thing that the post office might allow us to put in. And lots of people go to the post offices, so thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think between Michelle and I, we can probably get those around to the various places. Good, thank you.
Sure.
Any other subjects that we really need to consider? Bruce?
Yeah, one thing before we start considering like sizes and stuff, a lot was said at the meeting in Brookendale about the fields in Sladeville,
Mm-hmm.
that they were prime ag land, and were we gonna include that
From the first meeting?
into the hamlet? Yeah.
Yeah.
The field's right over here. That was brought up quite a few times for people that I was talking to. So I just thought I'd say that.
Yeah,
And Nan had a interesting answer to that there were different ways we could handle it, if
Right.
I remember.
Right.
So, Cool.
Michelle?
Yeah, this is just a nuts and bolts thing. I mean, I think we said we were going to take those boxes away next week. So if you want to put the FAQs out, I'm just wondering how long the boxes should stay and if you're going to put the FAQs out next to them.
Why don't we leave them up till the end of the year and put the FAQs out, and we'll put that out when we send out things about, we'd like people to respond to this survey. The boxes are still out, send comments, and there are FAQs out in various places. They're also on the website. But I think a lot of people like to read things in hard copy, so we can put all of those in one thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
Oh, go ahead,
ask-
Michelle.
No, I'm happy to distribute them. I'm just curious.
Okay. I think the end of the year makes sense.
Let me know if you need any help.
Great. Bill?
So Jean, with your permission, I'd like to draft the note that Velvet's going to put on the town listserv for tomorrow. I think just because I know what all we've now said we want to have in there. So I will just give her a text, and unless you want to do it, which is also
No, I
fine
would
by
love
me.
it if you did that. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, fine. And I agree with keeping the box up. I mean, I think that we need to put a push on, say feedback by December 14th is, urged, encouraged, whatever. But I think we should keep the boxes up for a while for those that dribbled in late, but yeah.
Yeah. And then we
Jean,
can
I
just-
had just a question about the frequently asked question. Is there any frequently asked question from the Thursday or Sunday event that wasn't included on the existing frequently asked question that you need to have something else added to it?
It's a good question.
Yeah, have to look at it.
Potentially the distinction between zoning and site plan, that really only came up one time, but is sort of a key fundamental concept, but I don't know. I didn't have anything else. Other than why aren't there more farmers on the committee? Aren't there more people opposed to zoning on the committee? But that's, I think,
Yeah.
not. To which, by the way, the point is that the only farmer that applied to be on this zoning commission doesn't live in the town, as I understand it. So, it is hard. I mean, if you're trying to fill life as a farmer, you probably don't have a lot of time to serve on committees like this.
Right.
So it's a bad problem.
Tree farmer.
You're a tree farmer. Exactly. Good. Okay, that sounds great. In that case, I'm going to go on to the next thing on my agenda, which is we now have decided what we're going to do next Tuesday. We're not having any further meetings in December. The January meetings that we have scheduled are on the 11th and the 25th. And my question had been, should we schedule another meeting in January, perhaps? I think I'm going to ask you all to think about that, and we can answer that next week. If we normally had one in January, it would be on the 18th, which is the day, but we can't have it on the 18th because you would have a town board meeting that day, right?
Oh,
Is that right?
it-
That would be the third Tuesday. You have a meeting on the third Tuesday?
No,
No, maybe it's possible then.
no, yeah, that wouldn't be.
Okay, so that would be.
It's definitely not a board meeting day.
Okay, well, that's a tentative day. I want you all to look at your calendars and we'll think about it. We can always put it in tentatively and decide, no, we don't need to meet, or absolutely, by God, we need to meet. So, but that's a tentative day. How's that for you, Nan?
So I'm confused. So your regular meeting dates are the 11th and the
11th and the
25th.
25th. And so the next one would be if we had one in the middle, it would be the 18th.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't believe I have anything that night scheduled.
Okay. So we'll see, we'll decide for sure what we're gonna try to do at the next meeting, and we can also, as I said, schedule it tentatively. That is what I have to do for tonight. So let's just think about how we would do next week. I think what we're talking about doing is looking at the map of the town, looking at each of the hamlets that we're discussing. We can take them in alphabetical order or size or whatever, and thinking about where their limit should be. That's the basic idea, right? Okay. I feel good about that.
And I left those maps with Mark, so you have them on big paper, and I believe you have all of the natural resource maps that we did from the very beginning also on paper that you can cross-reference from environmental features.
Okay, yep. So you have all those maps. Great. I think we only got like 1 or 2 sticky notes. Like I know that Emily Adams said that her house should be in the hamlet of Brooktondale. So there we are. So
That was a comment.
that was her comment. So, and she's right, since the Adams family have been, much of the keepers of Brooktondale for a couple of generations now. So I think this is weird, but I'm going to suggest that we might adjourn 15 minutes early because I think we have gone through what we were going to try to discuss tonight. Does that seem reasonable?
I think the battery stopped on the clock.
You think the battery stopped on the
No, I'm
clock?
kidding.
It's just about.
It's 8:58. I mean, we could actually get home early. Why can't the site plan?
Let's go.
Okay. I see a movement to adjourn then. Thank you so much. I will see you on the next Tuesday. Good night.
Okay. Thanks,
Good
everybody.
night, everyone.
So this map from July 13th would be the same map we'll be looking at for
Yes,
hamlets.